Case 1. The Vanishing of Noor. Aftab, the old city of Rawat, liked to pretend it was made of certainty. Straight roads, familiar doorways, tea vendors who remembered everyone's stories. But there were corners where the world folded strangely, and one of those corners swallowed Noor Aftab whole. Her friends remembered her as the girl who carried a sketchbook like a second ribcage, always tucked under her arm, pages blooming with charcoal strokes. She was 19, studying architecture, in love with carved doors and abandoned forts. On the humid September evening she vanished. She told her mother she was going to sketch the old British watchtower at the edge of the city. The sky was the color of burnt copper. The watchtower, a solemn pillar in an overgrown field. A shepherd passing by later claimed he saw her perched on the stone ledge, drawing, hair blown wild by the wind. He noticed nothing strange, only that she seemed to pause mid-stroke, look up sharply, and then climb down. Her bag and sketchbook were found the next morning at the foot of the tower. The last page held a drawing, unlike her usual steady hand, frantic lines, overlapping circles, shapes resembling a cluster of eyes watching from behind a wall. The police couldn't explain why the graphite was smudged, as if rubbed by trembling palms. They couldn't explain the footprints, either hers leading away from the tower and then stopping halfway through the field, as if she stepped into a doorway that wasn't there. For days the city hummed with theories. Some said she'd run away. Others whispered of the watcher of the watchtower. A local superstition slept under dust for decades. But Noor was never found, and the sketchbook sits in a police cabinet, a silent witness to a moment the world refused to remember properly. The vanishing of Noor Aftab. Rumors have a strange appetite. They feast on silence. In Noor's case, the silence was colossal. Investigators combed through her phone. The final search in her browser was a curious one. Architecture lines that move by themselves. It felt like a joke at first, something a tired student might type. But her best friend, Saba, swore that Noor had been unsettled for weeks, claiming her sketches sometimes appeared, shifted the next morning, as if the buildings she drew changed their posture overnight. One detail stayed smudged in the official files. The shepherd, interviewed again, admitted something he hadn't said earlier. He saw a shadow in the tower that evening, tall, unmoving, shaped vaguely like a person but too thin, too still. When asked why he hadn't mentioned it before, he simply said, "Because it didn't feel like something I was allowed to see." Search teams found no shadow person, but they did find claw-like etchings on the tower's inner wall. Fresh ones, as though something had scraped hard stone in the dark. In later weeks, 3 different people who walked near the tower reported hearing a girl's voice, soft, wind-dragged, repeating the same sentence, "Don't draw the doorway." To this day, the case remains open, with the sketchbook sealed in a temperature-controlled archive. Those who've seen it say the last page looks different every time. Case 2. The midnight bus of Chakora Hills in December 1994. A night bus carrying 18 passengers departed from Chakora for Herpa, a route as ordinary as warm bread, as predictable as morning prayer. The bus should have arrived before midnight. It never did. Somewhere along the winding spine of Chakora Hills, the bus disappeared. Search teams found no wreckage, no skid marks, no broken branches, nothing to suggest the vehicle had ever touched the mountain road. What they did find was stranger. Near a cliffside, investigators discovered the bus driver's scarf snagged on a branch. Nearby, a set of parallel lines carved into the dirt spiraled outward, as though something heavy had rotated slowly in place. A mechanic later noted the spacing of the lines was identical to the distance between tires of that bus model, but the spirals bent inward, almost as if the bus had corkscrewed into the earth itself. Witnesses from a small hamlet below the hills claimed they heard the sound of an engine that night, steady at first, then rising to a shrill whine before stopping altogether. One villager said she saw a faint glow drifting along the mountainside, like headlights submerged underwater. Despite weeks of searching, not a single passenger was ever found. The midnight bus of Chakora Hills. Years later, the theories only grew more tangled. A hiker in 2007 claimed he found the number plate C4881, half buried in gravel, on an abandoned trail. When authorities returned to examine the site, it was gone to earth undisturbed. The hiker later admitted he had taken a photograph, but when he printed it, the number plate in the image was reversed left to right, as if photographed through a mirror. Another unsettling clue emerged in 2012. A man from Herpa received a voicemail from an unknown number. The recording was brief, a few seconds of muffled engine noises, a woman crying softly, and then a man's voice saying, "We haven't moved in hours, are we still on the road?" The number could not be traced. To this day, locals in Chakora Hills tell travelers to avoid the road after dark. They say, if you listen carefully, you might hear the hum of an engine beneath the soil turning, forever turning. Case 3. The locked room death of Professor Ramesh. Varma. Professor Ramesh Varma was a man built of routines: tea at 7 o'clock, lectures at 9 o'clock, long walks at 5 o'clock. When he was found dead inside his locked study on a calm March evening, it rattled the quiet university town of Awadpa. The room was locked from inside, all windows bolted, no signs of forced entry. His body lay slumped at the desk, pen still in hand, as though he had paused mid-sentence. But the sentence he was writing made little sense. "It's behind the second door. Do not let it knock 3 times." There were no second doors in his study. The police noted oddities. The books on his shelf were rearranged by height, a system he never used. Dust patterns suggested that someone or something had spent considerable time pacing in a circle around the table. Despite the windows being shut, the curtains moved faintly when officers entered, as if disturbed just moments earlier. His diary entries before his death hinted at paranoia, tapping sounds at night, whispers behind the wall, a shadow that kept reappearing in the same corner of his study, tall and narrow, like a folded human being. An autopsy revealed no poison, no trauma. His heart had simply stopped. Case 3. The locked room death of Professor Ramesh Varma. Months after his death, a graduate student organizing the professor's papers discovered something startling. A crude map sketched on the inside cover of a book. It depicted his study but with an extra door drawn between 2 bookcases. When investigators examined the actual location, they found faint rectangular marks on the wall, perfectly aligned with the dimensions of a doorframe long painted over. A wall scanner showed a hollow space behind it. Breaking it open revealed a narrow chamber filled with abandoned manuscripts and a rusted folding chair. Dust lay thick on everything except the floor, where a path had been cleared recently, footprints leading toward a dark stain at the far end of the chamber. The stain tested positive for human perspiration, tinged with cortisol levels so high they indicated extreme terror. But the chamber was too small for a person to have lived or hidden there for long. The official report declared the professor's death natural. Locals say otherwise, especially those who hear tapping sounds near the old building at night. 3 taps, always 3. Case 4. The desert footprints of al-Khoor. In the vast golden hush of al-Khoor, where dunes shift like sighing giants, a team of researchers studying desert migration patterns encountered a puzzle that has defied science for decades. In March 1981, satellite imagery captured a perfect line of human footprints, stretching for nearly 27 kilometers across an untouched desert corridor. The footprints belonged to a single individual, adult-sized, barefooted, and spaced evenly as though the person walked calmly, unhurried, not stumbling from dehydration or fatigue. Yet the path began in the middle of the desert, with no tracks leading into it, and it ended abruptly at a dune's crest with no tracks leading away. A ground team sent to investigate found the prints impossibly well defined, edges sharp as if pressed only minutes earlier, despite there being no wind disturbance for days. The final footprint was deeper than the rest, as though the person had pressed down with unusual weight before simply ceasing to exist. Temperature readings near the last footprint showed a sudden drop, anomalous. For desert climate, and a faint chemical residue was detected, the closest match being compounds found in meteorites. Some scientists proposed heat mirage trickery, others speculated hallucinations or satellite glitches, but the on-ground team swore by what they saw: footprints of a traveler who appeared from nowhere and vanished into nothing. The desert footprints of al-Khoor. Years later, strange echoes resurfaced. A Bedouin herder recounted an encounter with a man wandering barefoot across the dunes, skin glowing faintly under the moonlight. When the herder called out, the man turned but his face, the herder claimed, did not know how to be a face, features blurred like sand in wind. When the herder blinked, the man was gone, leaving footprints that led perfectly toward the horizon, then dissolved mid-stride. In 2003, a geologist revisiting the original site placed seismic sensors near the last footprint's location. That night, the sensors recorded a rhythmic vibration, soft, steady, like footsteps approaching, then stopping, then approaching again. The geologist left before dawn and never returned. To this day, desert travelers sometimes find solitary footprints appearing overnight neat, aligned, unaccompanied by any trail leading in or out. Some say the desert keeps a walker who never belonged to Earth. Case 5. The Orchard Children of Shamsabad. In the spring of 1976, the farming village of Shamsabad experienced a tragedy wrapped in an enigma. 5 children aged between 8 and 12 vanished while picking apricots in the old orchard by the river. The orchard keeper, Baba Rof, was the last to see them. He claimed he heard them laughing among the trees, their voices bursting like tiny fireworks in the still air. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. When he reached the orchard clearing, the children were gone. The baskets stood upright, filled halfway. A radio one of the boys carried was still playing a folk song. A doll lay on the grass, its porcelain face cracked as if dropped in haste. But the strangest detail was the trees. All apricot trees bordering the clearing had their branches bent downward, not snapped, not broken, bent slowly over time, like fingers pointing toward the ground. Beneath one of the bent branches, investigators found a circular patch of soil darker than the rest, faintly warm, emanating a smell like burnt honey. Locals spoke in hushed tones of the orchard taking its due, a superstition older than written records, but no physical evidence ever explained where the children went. The Orchard Children of Shamsabad. Decades passed, but the orchard remained unsettling. In 1998, a journalist researching the case interviewed elderly Baba Rof. He confessed something that never made it into police reports. On the day after the disappearance, he heard the children's voices again, faint, overlapping as if coming from caverns deep below the soil. They weren't crying. They sounded as though they were still playing. Following the sound, he reached the same circular patch of soil. The earth seemed to pulse softly, as though breathing. Terrified, he never stepped into the orchard at dusk again. During the monsoon of 2004, a powerful storm uprooted one of the old apricot trees. Under its roots, searchers discovered a cluster of small wooden carvings, 5 figures, crudely shaped but unmistakably representing children. Each figure carried an etched symbol on its back. Strangely, the symbols matched markings found in prehistoric cave art 50 kilometers away. Experts claimed it was coincidence. Villagers didn't believe that explanation for a second. Some nights, wanderers claimed they hear laughter in the orchard light, distant, childlike but fading instantly, like wind holding a memory for just a heartbeat. The 5 children of Shamsabad were never found.